Hello and welcome. With the passing of another year in Agua Dulce, our Landscape Committee is sharing our annual report in video format. This will help us keep in touch with those who can't attend the annual meeting, as well as those outside of our HOA that have taken an interest in our sustainable landscape approach. For those who are unfamiliar with Agua Dulce, we're a managed community of 411 homes located in the foothills of the Tucson Mountains in the Sonoran Desert, about 6 miles northwest of Tucson, Arizona. Given our desert setting, our community has been sensitive to water conservation dating back to 2015. We practice conservation by adhering to Pima County Smartscape practices and by following irrigation guidelines recommended by Tucson Water. Thanks to the contributions of dedicated volunteers, our common areas host more than a dozen modest water harvesting and erosion control features. These are critical for preventing erosion of downstream paths while providing an opportunity for higher quality rainwater to infiltrate naturally in support of our native vegetation. For posterity, respective features are now mapped in an ArcGIS story map, which was updated in 2023 and which you may freely access via link in the description of this video. These efforts, coupled with community attention to water conservation, earned us recognition in 2023 by Pima County as a low-impact development case study site. This recognition also supports our National Wildlife Federation certification, which in turn supports property values and makes Agua Dulce a desirable place to live. As documented in our 2022 annual report, respective efforts have helped our community save 4.6 million gallons of water, yielding a cost savings of close to $19,000 relative to baseline data collected in 2016. This demonstrates that respective efforts not only can help with climate change resiliency, but can also save our association significant amounts of money. Details of our 2023 water savings are still being evaluated and will be shared as a separate link in the description of this video. In regards to our 2023 landscape practices, this video will summarize changes that have taken place in our community, mostly in regards to maintaining our common areas with less water given the severe drought facing the Southwest. Since Agua Dulce is a managed community, we live within the context of rules that explain how our community will be managed. These covenants require we put our landscape contract out to competitive bid on a regular cadence, as was done in late 2022. Under new leadership, rather than have our management company submit a standard boilerplate request for proposal, Landscape Committee volunteers developed a detailed RFP focusing on Pima County's Smartscape practices, while also capturing recommendations of 2 ISA-certified arborist surveys that took place in late 2022. 3 bids were received, researched, and discussed in open meeting sessions. After detailing pros and cons of each bid, reviewers observed that Santa Rita was the only company that took time to follow up with thoughtful comments and questions regarding our Smartscape requirements. This suggested Santa Rita actually reviewed our proposal rather than just submitting a boilerplate bid and considered our follow-up questions thoughtfully. Which makes sense for the slow-growing desert natives hosted in our community. As such, their proposal came in $10,000 under bid for our existing landscape contractor and more than $20,000 under bid for another competitor. We also observed that Santa Rita yielded better online reviews than its competitors, including our current contractor. In response, the committee selected Santa Rita with the goal of pivoting to smarter grounds maintenance, while also saving our association money. One of the practices that has changed includes no longer using blowers on bare soil to clear ground of small organic debris. This is a common practice that leaves bare ground exposed to baking in the sun, exposes tree roots to sunburn, and removes nutrients that trees rely on for healthy growth. Instead, we ask that material less than 6 inches in length be left on the ground to encourage an organic moisture barrier for water conservation and soil health for the benefit of our native vegetation. Another chronic challenge we share with many other HOAs is the practice of lion-tailing native trees like this one. This photo is from a report alerting board members that the practice is leading to sad sunburned spindles for trees in our common areas. Regardless of this tree's poor condition, residents observed it was continuing to be pruned. This was not meant to knock the hard-working boots-on-the-ground landscapers, but clearly demonstrated that they required training and careful oversight and guidance when maintaining our common areas. In response, we consulted with 2 ISA-certified arborists in 2022 regarding the condition of our common area trees. Both arborists recommended that tree pruning take place under the guidance of a certified arborist and only when absolutely necessary. Given historical overpruning, they recommended we give our trees at least 1 year to rest from these practices. In line with that guidance, our new landscapers have halted pruning in our common areas so that trees might recover from historical lion-tailing, as well as sunburn and stress resulting from loss of inner canopy. As this photo taken in late 2023 demonstrates, previously sunburned trunks are beginning to realize protective inner canopy growth, which will help shade and add mass to stressed limbs. In late 2023, we consulted again with 2 ISA-certified arborists to confirm the approach is helping. Both arborists confirmed our community trees are recovering and suggested we continue this approach for at least another year. So we've instructed Santa Rita to respect this guidance accordingly. With the eventual restoration of our inner canopies, we should see an increase in shade along our common area walking paths, but the benefits will take a few seasons to fully realize. In this regards, it's important for our association to respect the guidance of certified arborists as we continue moving forward. Having said that, we recognize that some pruning is inevitable for traffic visibility and safety. However, we now require that respective cuts must follow ANSI A300 guidelines for the health of our trees. Unless we have an emergency due to high winds or storms, structural pruning takes place in the fall under the guidance of a certified arborist. In response, structural pruning did take place in Agua Dulce by Romeo Tree Service during the week of December 18th in 2023. In 2022, we also documented the practice of poodling our desert native shrubs. This was halted in 2023 not only for the health of our plants, but also to help restore a more natural aesthetic that mimics Tohono O'Toole Park rather than a commercial property or strip mall. In 2022, we also documented examples of pruning at the wrong time of year, resulting in loss of blooms that local and migrating insects count on for food. In 2023, we no longer prune our shrubs year-round as was done in the past, rather only when it's appropriate for the plants and native wildlife, typically in the fall. This allows our pollinating shrubs to bloom for the benefit of native insects and the beauty of our community. Finally, our landscapers are no longer allowed to use string cutters for common area maintenance, since this practice can severely damage our forbs. Instead, they're required to cut plants by hand to a height of 6 to 8 inches, as demonstrated here by one of our community volunteers. This improves survivability of desert natives, resulting in less cost for replacement. We recognize these are not standard practices for an HOA, and in some cases, might counter the financial incentives that a contractor might have to remove and replace vegetation damaged by poor practices. Admittedly, it's taken us some time to reinforce these practices via one-on-one engagement with the boots-on-the-ground crews doing the actual work. To help with the same, community volunteers prepared a one-page guidance document that captures the most important highlights of how our community areas are to be maintained. We've also prepared a Spanish translation since many times crew members may not speak English, and we want to make sure our needs are understood. This approach helps reinforce practices over time, especially when ground crews might change from week to week. Regardless, volunteers and residents may find things that don't meet contractual obligations. Through careful documentation and respectful communication, Santa Rita does respond and has course-corrected where necessary. In fact, our landscape chair, Ms. Saundra Drain, meets with Santa Rita weekly to ensure pending issues and requests are addressed as soon as possible. I mention this only for the benefit of other HOAs to reinforce that weekly monitoring and one-on-one communication with your landscapers is absolutely critical for success, especially since this is not something your community management company will do on your behalf. In line with living in one of the world's wettest deserts, 2023 was challenging in regards to some intense summer storms witnessed throughout Tucson. These events have given us an opportunity to observe where existing water harvesting features need rehabilitation and where other features still need to be developed. In response, volunteers redeveloped our existing basins and identified other projects for scheduling and execution. The 2023 monsoon also brought extremely high winds, with many communities and public spaces impacted by broken limbs and fallen trees. Given historical lion-tailing in our own community, our common areas were not spared. As a result of broken limbs, some trees had to be severely cut back and others entirely removed given safety concerns. We did manage to turn lemons into lemonade by harvesting respective cuttings on site for reuse in our water harvesting basins. Thanks to coordination with Santa Rita and community volunteers, we were able to chip respective cuttings and mulch almost all of our water harvesting basins at no cost to the HOA. For sustainability of these efforts, we do need to keep our community updated and realize opportunities for engagement. In response, we've hosted several meet and greet events on weekends to give neighbors the opportunity to meet with one another and volunteer on the landscape. This also makes landscape committee leads accessible to the community, thus providing an opportunity to address questions or concerns in person. Volunteers also help maintain water harvesting features through basin redevelopment and rock placement, mulching of common areas, flagging problem areas for landscapers to follow through on, and/or assisting our commercial contractors with garbage and scat disposal. Our most successful event took place in December of 2023, which resulted in volunteers planting over 20 new trees in our common areas. Selection and location was determined by a certified arborist hosted by Tucson Clean and Beautiful, which helped us identify appropriate trees for planting, accounting for canopy size and placement. Residents also learned about proper tree planting techniques to help ensure survivability. Through careful placement, we managed to plant significantly more trees than had originally been removed due to sunburn and disease. Agua Dulce hosts a biannual open meeting to review recommendations for our new landscape procedural guidance document, which was originally shared with the community in early 2023. For context, the guidance contains critical information like irrigation and corner visibility maps, common area covenant restrictions, sustainable practices that will be adhered to by our contracted landscapers, and contact information for contractors and lead volunteers. Respective open meetings give residents an opportunity to recommend changes or updates based on problems or needs identified from the prior 6 months. Again, this helps realize community-wide one-on-one access for registering concerns or implementing recommendations. Our last meeting took place in September and yielded 13 updates capturing new information and lessons learned. In this regards, our landscape guidance is a unique living document that improves over time while providing opportunities for residents to contribute towards the same. One important update in 2023 was in documenting a buried and forgotten irrigation control timer we discovered when troubleshooting a high water use irrigation zone along Tombolo. The leak started in 2022, and since its source was never identified, the respective zone was shut down. Given our water use is generally low, we were not aware of status until a resident informed our board that the repair was never made. Volunteers subsequently investigated and discovered a buried timer and broken solenoid that was stuck in an open position. That valve has since been repaired, mapped, and documented in our guidance to ensure our next landscape chair or contracted landscaper has the information needed for remedying irrigation problems when they arise. Finally, our community regularly monitors and reports on common area irrigation leaks. When time permits, volunteers may repair these leaks on their own with a few dollars of materials purchased from our local hardware store. This saves our association hundreds of dollars that might otherwise be spent on emergency repairs. Thus far in 2023, about a dozen minor and major irrigation leaks have been mitigated community-wide thanks to our landscape chair and volunteers stepping up to make a difference. To ensure community transparency, the Landscape Committee has created a Google Drive that hosts meeting announcements and summaries, newsletter entries, revisions to our procedural guidance, and documentation regarding decision-making. There are also other resources relevant to our sustainable landscape practices. This approach helps us address the frequent queries we've received from other HOAs interested in our LEED certification and seeking guidance for their own community. For other community leaders that might be interested or might be starting respective efforts from scratch, a link for an index to that drive has been shared in community forums and is included in the description of this video. In 2024, we do have some projects in mind and look forward to continuing sustainable practices and making volunteer opportunities available. As occurs with any change, we also ask for patience as we work through some challenges. Specifically, we're asking the community to keep an eye out for one or more individuals not associated with our landscapers who have on more than one occasion damaged common area trees, leaving broken branches behind. If these individuals happen to watch this video, we kindly ask that unless you've engaged with the Landscape Committee and been properly trained, that you please not take respective measures into your own hands. Instead, simply fill out our online maintenance request form, which will be forwarded to our landscape chair and discussed with our landscapers on a weekly cadence. Or you can also participate in any one of our open meetings or volunteer events where we can discuss concerns or recommendations one-on-one. Needless to say, Agua Dulce is an exceptional community designed and established within our Sonoran Desert with natural native vegetation as a centerpiece. The work done by so many volunteers over the years, as well as our National Wildlife Federation certification, highlights the uniqueness and ongoing appeal of our Tucson neighborhood, in large part thanks to all the volunteers that have stepped up to make a difference. Thank you for your ongoing support.